online. So if I am to go in alphabetical order, maybe I could ask whether or not the Barbados Remote Hub would be ready at this time to give some feedback on their discussions under this exercise. So I'll pause for a second.
I may have to turn this down. Can you hear me? Yes, we are ready to share a comment.
Oh. All right. Well, please go ahead. You have the floor.
So, yeah, oh, thank you. All right. So just succinctly, we dealt with the CIGF first and share more recommendations with you. We felt that the CTU should, the IGF should be coordinated, and this is a point I made earlier today, that all of the IGFs should be coordinated so that the national initiatives can take place leading up to the regional IGF. We feel that this would help to better agenda development, better awareness, so that persons who are attending, and hopefully there will be new people, they would come with a better appreciation for the issues. See, we also made a recommendation that CTU should have the responsibility to have a directory and our focal points for the organizing committee for the national IGF. So there should be a repository somewhere where we can go and see who the resource persons are coordinating the national IGFs. The IGFs should seek to have their IGF formally recognized by the IGF Supporting Association. We feel that it lends itself to the rigor, the rigor of having that recognition helps in the structure and format of the event. CTU should also offer fellowships to the CIGF that would encourage persons who have not participated before. So persons in underrepresented countries in the Caribbean should have an opportunity to participate in the regional forum through fellowships. We feel also that a pre-event should be organized for the CIGF with a focus on the national IGF. So leading up, or a pre-event to the CIGF, where there's a specific opportunity or forum for the national IGF coordinators to come together to share experiences and to share knowledge towards the better development of the national IGFs. To develop initiatives and better support. Oh, this one relates to this better support of remote participation. So we think there should be more dedicated resources to this. Very often well, I actually won't get into too much detail because I know time is short. So this includes a dedicated moderator and technical team, organizing committee to develop an agenda. We are saying that with respect to the organizing committee for the CIGF, that at least 50% of that committee should be made up of persons outside of the CTU. So they could be chairs of the organizing committees of the national IGFs. They should be represented on the organizing committee for the CIGF so that they can help to shape the agenda. We feel also that there's opportunity for youth engagement at the CIGF, and a practical way to do this is to engage with the local youth within the community, within the country where the CIGF is being hosted. In this case, Tortola may be a link with the Ministry of Education to have an event specifically focusing on youth, wherever the CIGF goes. The CIGF should precede the LAC IGF, and wherever possible, and every 3 years, they should be held jointly, as was done in Trinidad previously, LAC IGF 4. In relation to the policy document, we certainly believe that broadband connectivity is still a priority, even though we have good connectivity in most of the Caribbean countries, but there's a lack of regulation as it relates to the quality of service and pricing. So we think that while we have excellent fiber, there is quality of service issues and also the cost of connectivity. Areas of priority, yes, number resources together. Sorry, I'm lost on number 2. Number 2 is still a priority in terms of the policy document. I'm sorry, the notes are totally not clear. Content development is still an area of priority. Number 4 is still a priority for us. Number 4 is which issue? The fact is the policy area area number 4 is still a priority. I'm actually trying to pull it up here. Number 5 is also still an area of priority, building capacity for permanent secretaries. So the policy area number 5 talks about capacity building, and we are aware that through the ministerial seminars and so on that some capacity building takes place. Unfortunately, though, the cycle of elections and so on that we have in the region, it means that we're forever teaching the basics, so to speak, to ministers who may or may not have appreciation for the IG issues. And we feel, therefore, that a better area to, or at least there should be a joint effort to educating permanent secretaries and senior policy advisors who are in a position to advise ministers, irrespective of who those ministers are, if there's a cabinet reshuffle or if there's an election. Priority number 6 is still important as well: research, examination, measurement, reporting on the development and uses of internet resources. And we've seen that where we go to, whether it's the regional, the extra-regional, or the global forum, we do not have the data to present. We cannot talk in clear and concise terms about internet uses within the Caribbean. We think this hampers policy development and hampers our ability to engage in the international discourse. That is it from the Barbados Sub. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was quite useful and comprehensive. I'll ask, though, that you send the report from it into us.
We will.
Such that we can include it in our report of the meeting and basically take the points into consideration so that we don't miss anything. Thank you very much. What about Trinidad and Tobago? Is anyone there from Trinidad and Tobago who would speak about your discussions on the exercise? I'm seeing a face, but I'm not hearing anything.
Hello, we're here.
Okay, yeah.
Right. I'm assuming everyone can hear me, and if not, they're going to do something funny. Good to see some familiar faces. Waves at everyone. I'm just going to deal with question 1. Question 2, I'm not prepared to discuss fully at this point, so why waste your time? With question 1, I've noted that there's a question about what is relevant and what is no longer relevant. And I pose to you that this is the wrong question. I pose to you instead that this is about whether things have evolved, which they have. I've heard quite a bit about priorities. I've heard some discussion about use of social media and it being a public space when it's not a public space. It's a private space that is publicly used. The data there does not belong to any government, or it belongs to a private company and held in trust, if you want to think of it that way. It is also not deleted. It is simply made unavailable. So the technology has evolved, and the conversation hasn't, is one of the best ways I can put it. So my contention is that the conversation needs to evolve. We need to be discussing digital footprints. We need to be discussing the Caribbean and the nations tied to the Caribbean, what we call the Caribbean in this instance, because I'm quite aware that not every country in the Caribbean is being represented here. We call it the Caribbean. This goes to a Cardesis thing. Hi, Deidre. Hi, Jacqueline. But I'm also keenly aware that having dealt with many of these conversations in the United States, that we're lagging. Having written about these topics quite a bit over the decades, we are lagging. Our digital footprints are an issue of our privacy, our citizens' privacy, and questions about whether governments have a right to deal with things, and balancing that with government rights deals with constitutional reform, because the constitutions are what are there to balance the power between the people and the governments. I'm pretty certain that everyone knows that, but I'm not seeing anything related to that. We're talking about all of that, but we're also not talking about what private corporations are able to understand from our data. As something that I've been delving into natural language processing as an example. The data online is already being processed by Google. It already has been. I'm pretty sure by Facebook, by Twitter, and corporations like that that know more about the Caribbean than some of the people that I know. I know a few people who are very knowledgeable. And where does this play into what we actually own? Do I own this conversation? Do you own this conversation? There has to be some way for an internet governance forum to advise governments in the interests of the stakeholders, and in other words, the end users, of all of this. And for the life of me, I'm not hearing a current conversation on that. You'll forgive me, but I have a tendency, the people who know me know this, to say things as I see them. So I'd like to just leave that comment there, and I'm done. Thank you.
One thing I would ask is maybe you could email us the comment or the key points as such that, as I said, we can take it into account. I get the point about the conversation and certain issues that I was wondering while you were speaking, and maybe you could give me just a quick response in the yes or no vein as to whether this would fall more in, whether it falls in the area of legal stroke, what is it? Legal, huh? You're right. Thank you very much. Whether it falls in the bucket of legal framework, stroke enforcement.
Okay. The short answer is I don't know. The longer answer is I believe so. However, everything that's been talked about or talked around deals with this core issue of about who actually owns the data. And when we talk about all of these things, online protection for children, which the United States actually has a federal act regarding, and the UK as well, Europe as a matter of fact. When we talk about all of these things, we are dealing with data. And that data belongs to somebody. It's accessed through somebody. And that is the core issue. That is a central issue. And without addressing that issue, these other things just sit there. So that's my response.
Okay. Thank you very much. And there is that data protection issue again, and we'll see if we could make some time for that during the course of tomorrow. I can't promise, but we'll see what we can do. Thank you very much. Any other remote hubs online? Is St. Vincent and the Grenadines there that might have been working on this? Apparently not. Any others? We'll wait 10 seconds. Okay, no further response. So thank you very much, folks, the remote participants, for staying the course with us through this exercise. It's much appreciated, the feedback that you've given, and we look out for your written inputs. So we get into the room here now. Should I start on my left and we go that way? All right. If we could get the spokesperson or from the first group on my left here. That one there is good, you know.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. Go ahead.
Yes. We look at the questions and we kind of combine them into one area.
Remind us who you are, please.
My name is Maxwell George.
Mhm.
I'm the Deputy Director
Here in Virgin
in
Islands.
in the U.S. Virgin, in the British Virgin Islands. I'm sorry. Well, I must say so. I live in both countries. So, but right now I'm in the British Virgin Islands. We look at the questions and we sum it up into basically one particular area that we look at into about 6 areas. We kind of categorize the questions into what should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And we look at it. We said research policy. So yes, research policy and legal framework. So we look at how we could combine that into have and should inform everything. This area should include academic. We should also look at legislation to protect children, which also deal with the practicing. I'm missing something here. Nothing seems to clear. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, protecting people should be reconfigured to strengthen the policy capacity that are informed, capture, analysis, clearly identifiable policies and authorities. And we look at number 2, access. We should also look into using USF for inclusion of persons with disabilities. We should look at also have it done through schools and other demographics, but digital divide as opposed to just graphic concerns, geographic concerns. We also look into the disaster recovery of these things, because when we have disasters, if we do not have a good recovery process, we can have a lot of challenges. So we look into that as a collaboration for all over. Showing up into islands, we can deal with other islands and so forth, so we can have a better way that we can recover when you go down. Because we recently seen some of that in the rains that we had. I know I had problems in dealing with my phone. Sometimes on the phone, all of a sudden, books gone. So if we can have a better collaboration among the islands, we can be able to recover and be able to use our internet process very easily. We look into e-commerce as well, which will be number 3. New priority. We look at also of electronic transaction, domains, names, consumer protection, which we know that is very important to have a consumer protection once you're dealing with this type of information, because we know that we have information with us, we must be able to protect the consumer in some way or the other, because most of these internet areas would actually have some kind of impact on our people. We look at the content of these things, digitization of information. We can look at how we can actually store these things instead of having these paper stored all over the place. We can have electronic libraries, so we can store these things, so we can give us better protection of information going forward in the future. Because in many areas you can go and look at files, and when you touch these files, it just disintegrates in your hand. But if we have electronic type areas, we can preserve these things more easily. We also look at awareness. We find that basically the clearinghouses, observatories, look also at direct outcome of the IG events to one point. we can look again as to how these things can affect these areas and what we're doing to protect ourselves into these areas. And we feel that the government should be involved heavily by depending on groups like this one here. That we can have forums that we can deal with some of these areas to protect the usage of this internet, because we know internet can be good and it can be used for bad. But it's just like someone spoke about it today. It's neutral, but it's how we use it. So if we actually can use this thing in a way that that groups like this can influence the governments, we will have a much better way of using the internet. And at the end of the day, we all can benefit from it because it's here to stay whether we believe it or not. I can recall when I was in the military, a young man told me, George, in a few years, you will be able to walk into a store, look at the merchandise you want, take out a credit card and pay for it, gone. You haven't looked at a single soul, nobody. And today you could do it. I can wake up any 3 o'clock in the morning, look at what I want, order it, pay for it, haven't seen anyone. That is the power of the internet. So it depends on how we use it and whether or not we want to accept it. It's here to stay. And the better we know, the more we know about it. And at least if we have government legislation to protect us against some of the fallout from these things, we can find that the internet can be a powerful tool that we can use not only for our own personal use, but for the use to grow our communities. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Was there anything specific on the organization of the CIGF, or would that seem to be just the first question, right?
Yes, I just added on to what Maxwell was just saying. The two questions we merged into one. So what we would have seen is that in reconfiguring the priorities as they were, we introduced other priorities, and from those other priorities, the expectation is that that has an impact specifically on the CIGF. So for instance, the public awareness one, it actually dealt with setting up some form of IG observatory. And we believe that CIGF could be one of the highlights of the observatory. So the observatory has digital activities and it has in-person activities.
Okay. Well, do send us the written record, as it were, so that we can take it into account properly. Now, remember, tomorrow morning, the CTU Secretary General will also be making a presentation about future evolution. So I think it's good that you all, everybody here would have at least thought a bit about the future and organization of the CIGF, so that when you hear the presentation tomorrow, you'll be better prepared to comment effectively on whatever suggestions are in there. But even so, I will again point you to the existing document on the event website, which is the Caribbean Internet Development Foundation paper. So you could look at that even before the presentation tomorrow, in light of your thoughts right now from the discussions this afternoon. Okay, all right, let's go on to group number 2 at the back, who would speak on that on their behalf.
Hi.
Okay, remember?
Ashel Ford, Barbados IGF. Okay, so we answered question 1A. Are the current areas, are there any areas no longer relevant? With no, we thought that they were also relevant. As it relates to whether there are areas that should be included, we felt that an area specifically dealing with the digital economy was missing. So that would be our suggestion for that. And as it relates to the random notes under question 1, we felt that this was a definitive yes, that gender inclusion is a big deal at LAC IGF and Global IGF, and that it is a big issue in the Caribbean, and that it is conspicuously missing from the agenda.
And that it is what?
conspicuously missing from the agenda.
Okay. Okay.
And of course, also gender definitely, but the sustainable development goals as a whole, that there should be more input where that is concerned, seeing as how it is a big issue at Global AGF, and we want the CAGF to be feeding our concerns as a region into Global AGF. Okay, so number 2. With regard to the organization, essentially we agree with the random notes here, that bottom-up inputs from the national AGS and top-down from the priorities of Global AGF, and the calibration and more interaction with the regional AGFs. With regard to content, we felt that the priority areas should be addressed specific to various sectors. So for example, if we're discussing the legal framework priority area, how does the legal framework specifically relate to like the health sector or financial industry sector or any of the other sectors, specifically to the different areas. With regard to participation, we felt that some areas were missing. For instance, youth, persons with disabilities, the legal community, again, the financial services sector at the CAGF level. We did acknowledge that there was input from the ISPs. We did hear from Digicel yesterday. As it relates to participation at academia, we felt that AGF academia seems to be restricted to universities. So we wondered about primary school teachers and secondary school teachers and community colleges and academia from that viewpoint. Especially if we're going to talk about education. I think university level is too late to be teaching or to be starting to introduce the concept of internet governance. Outputs, outcomes, and successes. We felt that we don't do enough storytelling and sharing of successes in the region. So we felt that our recommendation should be that we do more of that, more storytelling. What's something awesome that happened out of Caribbean AGF? And how can we make a 30-second video and let it go viral across the region? And we also wanted, and this could be, storytelling could be a mechanism for this, but greater insight into how the outcomes from CAGF influence policy on a national level. So how did the discussion that started here at CAGF see some kind of concrete change happening in one of our territories? Or all of them, for that matter. And coordination among the national, regional, and international fora. So Rodney talked a lot about this in his intervention. I did as well, coming up to the report on Barbados AGF about having maybe an AGF secretariat for the region that would aid in the organization, some kind of detailed AGF toolkit with support for the from the secretariat for planning and organization. And then we came up with this kind of AGF in a box concept where there's this, cookie cutter thing around the region. The topics change, the people change, obviously the location change, but all the things that remain the same are easy because they're the same across the region. Funding and getting people involved and capacity building and that sort of thing.
We could sell IGF franchises.
Exactly. We can be next big McDonald's.
Yeah.
So that was it. That was it from us.
Thank you. Again, we would need to get the written report. Maybe one of the things that we need to do in terms of our organization of CIGF is to have some formal rapporteurs, but we usually get our attendees basically to send us the reports, and we are the secretariat kind of collate the information that we get.
Can I,
Yep.
just offer a bit out of advice where that is concerned.
Mhm.
We did that for Barbados IGF. We had a rapporteur.
Mhm.
And this is something I probably should have mentioned, but it only really just occurred to me. The rapporteur was a rapporteur, but not somebody who is versed in, they're not a technical person. They don't
Right.
know about AG,
Right.
that sort of thing. She did a great job. Our report is comprehensive and it's great, but there needed to be a lot of work done on it afterwards.
Right.
So
Interpreting.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And there would obviously, because she doesn't understand the context, there were a lot of
Right.
things that need to be reworded and reworked. And
Right.
yeah, so it would help if the rapporteur is somebody who is, involved in this community.
And that could be why we've been doing it the way we've been doing it, because we basically get the persons involved to distill the ideas back to us. So it was just an idea that I kind of threw out there, but thank you very much. We're getting to our last report for today. And who is going to speak from on this side? I see Jacqueline with the mic.
Yeah, again. Well, the first thing that I have to say is that we really spent all our time on the first question.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, you were going to get a lot of good answers from everybody
Yes.
else on the second. The first thing that we had to do was to build a common understanding of what we meant by priority focus
Mm-hmm.
and strategic priorities,
Mm-hmm.
and what we meant by things that are important but cross-cutting.
Okay.
So they're cross-cutting things like gender,
Oh,
which should be
cross-cutting.
cross-cutting.
All right.
So gender, for example, should be in everything.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be necessarily
Be
gender
something.
by itself on a day in a session by itself. But when you talk about social media, we should talk about gender. When you talk about laws and legal frameworks, you should include gender. Same thing with people with
With disabilities.
differently abled persons.
Mhm.
Same thing with, a lot of these things are things that you must have across the board. So, long said, neutral, yeah. So when we, having agreed on that sort of thing, we determined that things that still needed to be strategic priorities with physical infrastructure, because in particular because of our lack of, forgot the word, resilience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Logical internet tech, because if we didn't have the critical internet infrastructure, it wouldn't be critical if it would something that needed to be high focus all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Legal frameworks, those are both things that are specific that we must look at for particular things. And the fact, as Taryn and we're talking about, which is pretty much everything needs a legal framework in order to function.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the undercutting, cross-cutting things. Public awareness was considered a cross-cutting thing and not necessarily a strategic focus anymore, because we are all aware nowadays that we can't do things in quiet and have any sort of resonance.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that we do, we must do with a focus on the public awareness.
Mm-hmm.
You don't talk into a room unless you've got your cameras in there. You put it all out there. Make sure we have our Twitter. We need to make sure that the public is aware of what we're doing all the time, and that should be almost not thought about.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be there underneath. Just like the example was, we can talk about internet, and we don't necessarily need to talk about electricity, but hello, without the electricity, there will be no, which camera am I supposed to be looking at?
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Without electricity, we could talk about internet all we want, but we still need to make sure that electricity is covered.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Internet content was a thing that we said we still need to focus on, because we do local content is something that's huge with regard to digital economy. That's where we're going to make our money. I mean, when you think about content creation, the companies that make all the money are the companies that create the content for people to consume. And how else are we going to get our little piece of the pie if we don't create our own content? If we just spend to consume, then it's really a cost to us and it's not any benefit. So we need to keep local content and the generation of local content and in the forefront. It's definitely a priority area economically in particular. Capacity building, there was another one of those that was both, yes, something in specific areas you need to think about about building capacity specifically, but everything we do should also have an idea
Element
of capacity building in it. Everything we do should have an element of those who know, teach those who don't know, every single thing. So because otherwise we'll end up with a few experts, some other, and we still be bringing in expertise from abroad. Research is one thing that definitely had to have a strategic priority because it's one of the things that we don't think about. And it's one of the things that's like the power for the internet. It's one of the things that must drive data, and the information that we get from that must drive our decisions and our areas of focus. And then on the new stuff, Internet of Things and big data, which go together, because the more things we have on the internet, the more data we have, and the bigger it gets. That connects to security, and it's also linked to privacy. Digital and virtual currencies. Digital identity, which Taryn referred to kind of as the footprint, which also links into the European focus on the right to be forgotten. And again, our data privacy. The idea of a digital identity also connects to the issues with social media and cybercrime and people pretending to be who they are not. How do we know who is who? But also, how can I prove that I am me? And if I allow if I forget myself and I remove all my data from the internet, then how do you know who I am? And how can we interact? Because so much of the information that we have about each other is digital.
Digital identities.
And then the last one was cross-border, cross-national jurisdiction issues. There are, going back to the legal frameworks that are being put in place, especially in the European Union. How do they apply those things to us, and how do we as small islands have a voice to say, gee, that's not going to work for us exactly? And under what circumstances can we have any input into some of these laws that are coming down and that are being applied to us? For example, we were informed that we needed machine-readable passports. We've now been informed that at some point in the future we're going to need biometric passports, so we can't go anywhere. Suppose biometric passport is not our kind of thing. You know, how do we get that information? How do we interact and say, hey, how can these laws be managed so that they work for us too and not just for you? And that was it.
All right, thank you.
Anything else that I missed? No? I left out what?
A good bit of what I heard from all the groups, I recognize as points that are already included in the existing policy framework. But it might be that we need to highlight them some more, because the current issue of the policy framework has 6 strategic areas of priority, whereas earlier versions the first version certainly had 5. And it went from 5 to 6 because the idea was supported that we needed to break out from under one of the 5 a particular point to greater prominence. So in distilling the feedback, that could possibly happen in terms of us revising the policy framework going forward. I would like one clarification in terms of the gender issue, because being of a particular gender myself, when what aspect of it specifically are we talking about? Because sometimes people talk about that from the viewpoint simply of probably we need to have more women involved with ICT or internet governance or whatever. Beyond that, I'm trying to figure out what aspects of when we say gender, what are we talking about? Yeah, Brisa.
We talked about online harassment before,
Yes.
right? There needs to be an acknowledgement of the fact that especially the most vile and dangerous types of online harassment and online abuse disproportionately affect women and girls, and why that is,
Okay.
right? And what can be done about it. So there needs to be that conversation as well. But the women in ICT, and especially in policy making,
Mm-hmm.
and the lack thereof, is also an issue that needs to be addressed.
So I could approach this one where we have disproportionate representation or involvement or impact on the basis of gender.
Yes, especially as it relates to access as well, because there is a digital divide there. In the Caribbean, women are disproportionately represented in poverty as well. And obviously, poverty has an impact on access.
All right. So basically, is in establishing policy, we should keep in mind that the policy should certainly not exacerbate a situation, but seek to, as part of their benefits, to offer some sort of redress to. Okay.
Right, and the policy has to be aware that this disproportion is there.
Yes.
If it's going to be a good policy.
Yeah. I see Shannon wants to make a comment.
Yes, I'm Shannon Osepa, Internet Society. I just would like to highlight a real world example that I have a couple of weeks ago in at the LAC IGF in Panama. And I think maybe Kevin, you would remember that. I was on a panel on human rights and cybersecurity, and one particular lady stood up and she said, okay, you guys are discussing this very nice theme, but when it comes, for example, to gender and all these kind of discussions, I mean, I'm gay, you know, so how are you going to deal with those other developments? So the point I would like to try to make is it's quite important for us to focus on gender, because of course we need to get everybody, let's say, involved in internet discussions, but we need to be careful till what extent we go with this kind of discussions, because I mean, on that panel, I didn't. There were other people on the panel as well. I didn't answer. I couldn't answer because I didn't know what to answer. But I just would like to say, okay, of course, we need to focus on gender. It's quite important for all of us to be engaged. If you look, for example, nowadays in the Caribbean, we are talking about most of the times of, let's say, girls, but we have a lot of boys that are almost lost as well. So what are we basically talking about? I mean, if you look at the country from where I come from, if you go at the universities, you almost don't see any boys at those universities. So I think we need to find ways how to reaching out to that other lost group as well, which is the boys in this particular case.
So the gender discussion could be neutral then. When I say that, it's not necessarily focused, but or maybe we focus on, as Ashel said, the discrepancies, the disproportionalities that exist to see if there is some undue impact because of gender.
Okay. Where we had started.
When you discussed it.
Yeah. I had to sign up for this one. Basically, we've got to look at gender through several different areas, several different directions. There is, yes, the IT woman and that sort of issue, which is about inclusion, increasing the inclusivity, the inclusion of women and other underrepresented groups in the discussion space. When that happens, then you start getting a different lens on every topic that you get. So we would not have had an issue with LGBT people asking, where am I in this gender discussion, if there had been LGBT people or an LGBT view in the panel, right? Similarly, if we're talking about issues with boys in education, then there's supposed to be someone who has put the viewpoint of people in that area on board. Because you can't have a panel of 27 people. However, which is why we say this is something that needs to be considered across the board. Everywhere you go, it's inclusion. Everything that you do, you try to get as many viewpoints as possible to put into the discussion on the policy.
Okay.
Right? However, there are specific issues that are specifically difficult, extremely difficult for specific groupings. And that is where we have another level. So when you come to dealing with women, yes, we have a very different approach to our online activity, because even our walking in the street activity, we walk in the street differently because we are attacked in the street far more often. Similarly, online, we have found ourselves needing to behave differently. So our experiences mean that there might be an entire top set of policy that needs to be discussed that would not be on the normal, regular, everyday 98%, however many percent people think, because there's a specific female experience that's different. Similarly, there's a specific child experience that's different. So the same way you say we need to consider a legal framework for dealing with children's safety online, we need to deal with women's safety online. So that does not mean that we don't consider women or any other community across the board. So it's both a a focus issue, and a cross-cutting issue. And it needs to be dealt with in that way. So everything we talk about needs to consider inclusion of everyone, including gender. And by the way, gender is not woman, gender is male, female, and other right now.
About 3 or 4 others would crop up.
So when we say gender, that includes boys, girls, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. India has 3 official genders, legal official genders. So yeah, that's why I really wanted to make that there are different ways of dealing with it, but we have to consider them all. So yes, in the next CGIF, we should have a little session for the few women in IT to get together and mentor each other and so forth. Yes, we should have input of women and differently able people and so on in every single panel, or the preparatory work to the panels, or the workshops or whatever. And yes, we need to have specific ones that deal with things that are important to these different groups of inclusion as well.
All right, I think I'm understanding a little more. Let me hear what Dee has to say.
What Deirdre Williams from St. Lucia has to say is that please, if we are talking about women, say we are talking about women, and don't say, I know what you just said, I did hear Jacqueline, but still, to reinforce it, do not say gender. For the last 3 or 4 years, I have been hearing people say gender when they mean women. So if we're talking about women, let's agree among ourselves that we'll say women. And while we're at it, and completely unrelated, could we please stop talking about free Wi-Fi in hotels, because it isn't free. Somebody always pays for it. Thank you.
Wi-Fi included. Okay. That's good. I'm glad I asked that question. I'm glad I asked that question. Okay. We are now at 5:20, so that means we probably missed a round or two of drinks already. So I would like to thank you all for your participation today. I think we had a fruitful day. I thank you for the workshop activity. And if it's the spokespersons who are involved, I'll ask you all to be sure to do your homework tonight such that you can submit your written notes to us tomorrow, please God, in whatever written form, whether it's, as I said, a prose thing, a PowerPoint thing, or whatever, but something that we can take, file, manipulate, and so on. Tomorrow, please God, I think, what is our start time? Is it, well, 8:45 is what we've been working with all the days. So 8:45 is our start time for tomorrow, please God. And we are going to have presentations on IPv6, and in particular, the one from the Secretary General on the proposed development foundation, which you can take a look at. The rest of you, I guess, could take a look at beforehand by going on the event website. In the afternoon tomorrow, we'll also have another little workshop where we're looking at developing the NIGFs by looking at that NIGF toolkit and maybe seeing what we might need to do to customize to Caribbean needs. So thank you very much all. We are now all invited to an evening at the pier at the Pier Park, the Tortola Pier Park, and we are looking for who? We are looking for Mayat's Chill Zone. Okay, and it's right next to the pier. 4 minutes walk. So I'll see you all there, and we'll chat some more with a glass of wine or something over gender. Yes. And I want to come back to. Okay, thank you very much, folks.